There are MSPs who fix computers. And then there are MSPs who shape their communities, influence policy, and leave a legacy of service that lasts far beyond the help desk. Today's guest is Christopher Barber, the chief nerd behind Cheaper Than A Geek, a wildly successful and community-driven MSP that's been serving clients in Maryland for over 25 years. Christopher is the kind of leader who doesn't just run a great business. He sits on boards, legislative committees, and workforce councils advocating for small businesses, cybersecurity readiness, and making sure our industry has a seat at the table. In this episode, we're diving into how he's kept his MSP relevant and fun for more than 2 decades, the power of local leadership, and why giving back might be the most strategic growth move you'll ever make. So let's get into it. All right, Christopher, before we get into all the work that you do for the industry, I've got to ask, if Chief Nerd were an official government title, what would your job description say?
Oh man, I did not see that coming. I guess it would be, you said for the government, right? I guess it would be protector of all things American in the nerd space.
I like it. That was quick. So let's rewind back to 2000, and that's when Cheaper Than A Geek was just starting. What was your vision back then, and how has that evolved over the years?
It's funny because it's evolved and it's not evolved. In the 90s, I was contemplating a career change and I thought there might be a future in computers. It seems funny to say that out loud now. So I was looking into getting into that space and built a computer to see if I had an aptitude for it and all that good stuff. And had some issues. So I had to go to a computer repair store and figure out what was wrong with this little Frankenstein computer I built. And that was when I realized the IT industry is famous for terrible customer service. I had a bad experience there. And I thought about it and I was like, if I started an IT company that was all about a good customer experience, this would be very different than most of what's out there. So that's what the original impetus was to start the company, my aha moment, if you will. And things have changed a lot. You don't need me to tell you this over the last 25 years, but that phenomenon has not really changed that much. It's still an industry with a lot of bad customer service. And we like to be the customer-centric IT provider, really. So that's what we get excited about. We've gotten a lot of accolades around our success there, and we're just really proud of fantastic customer experiences.
Yeah, and you always make it fun as well. I always love seeing your posts, and it just seems it would be great to be one of your customers for sure. So what's the secret to staying in business and loving it for 25 years?
Oh, that's a good question. And I think this actually lends itself to why customer service in this industry is so difficult in the first place. Nobody calls in and says, hey, the email server's down. Could you guys get to that in the next week or two? That would be fantastic. They're like, the email server's down. The big boss from corporate is going to be here at 10. The world's on fire and we are freaking out, man. And a lot of times that's every phone call you'll get in a day. And it can be a lot. So I've realized a long time ago, if you have a professional sense of humor around that, you're okay. If you don't, eventually you're going to want to jump out of a window. Everybody at Cheaper Than a Geek has, in their own way, a fairly well-developed sense of humor. And that is the secret to not becoming a jaded IT guy that's convinced everybody between a keyboard and a chair is an idiot. That makes it all work, in my opinion. So we have fun with it.
I love that. I love that humor because before being in this world, I was at a university and I actually talk about this at IT Nation a lot, how I would have so many things going on and then the computer would stop talking to the printer and I had 20 minutes left to get all of these packets done and the board's walking in and the president's wondering where it all is. And those are really stressful moments for a human. And it seems like nothing to somebody who doesn't know that could be someone's job on the line. And it's so important to have somebody that can be empathetic and humorous in those kind of times. Is wonderful. That's what that person needs, is to put it in perspective and get them back where they need to be. Yeah, that's great.
I totally agree.
Yeah. And you're involved also in so many initiatives, with the Chamber of Commerce, to the Anne Arundel County Workforce, the National Society of IT Service Providers. What pulled you toward getting involved in advocacy and local leadership beyond just running the MSP? Because that's a big role in itself. So, how taking on all of those?
That's a good question. It's not like at the beginning of all this, I said, oh, I got to go in that direction. It evolved over time. But my dad always said, and I'm sure he borrowed this from a famous person, but he said, if you like what you do, you never work a day in your life. So when I was evaluating what I wanted to do, I really enjoy helping people. And that's certainly something that our industry does fairly well. And that was what drove it all. And then over time, I started to get really excited. And I think you would appreciate this, just being a business owner. I like to tell folks that aren't business owners, like it's single-handedly the best thing and the worst thing that I ever signed up for. It's a lot, and I'm glad I did it, but nobody quite gets the struggles of a business owner like a business person does. And I had to learn that, like we all did. And I just get really excited about small business initiatives and everything around that. That's why that's our target client base, is small businesses under 100 persons in size. That's who we are, and we like to be that. And I get to talk to people like me all day long, which is just awesome. It's its own little culture, really. You know what I'm talking about. And even today, I went to a car wash with one of our cars and started talking to the owner of the car wash who I'd never met before. And an hour later, we're still talking because we're talking about the commonalities between IT businesses and car washes. And spoiler alert, there's actually a lot of them. I just like that world. So that kind of turned into, let me get involved with the Better Business Bureau and let me get involved with my local chambers. And as you mentioned, now it's spiraled and it's cool. I really like it. I feel like I get to help these organizations. I'm a big fan of pay it forward. So I don't ever sign up for these things expecting some sort of payday at the end of it or whatever. But sometimes there is like a fairly pronounced payback, if you can call it that. Being involved with the Anne Arundel County Workforce Development folks, that allows me the opportunity to influence the future pipeline of IT technicians. And I didn't like what my choices were years ago and decided, you know what, let me try to affect change. If I got to figure this out for my company, let me try to figure it out for the industry. And so I'm pulling along all of the local IT providers in this initiative and saying, hey, we don't like our candidate pools. Let's fix it. And it's changing, which is really gratifying. I'm a big fan of positive change and continual improvement. And I do that personally. I do that professionally. And I even do that in these other organizations because I just love that stuff.
Yeah. And it's amazing to see that change happen, especially with the National Society of IT Service Providers, where you and I both joined at the ground level, where we were figuring out what the formation, what it looked like, and to now have it be thriving and bringing in so many members. It's a wonderful thing to see it make change and stand up for what we were thinking about a few years ago, what we wanted to see happen, and see that happen now.
Absolutely. And I mean, we knew it was a good idea. It needed to, I don't know, have commercial success too. And it did. And that was a little bit like having a kid. You just see them blossom. And it's so rewarding. Our industry needs this. And one thing I didn't expect in a million years to come out of this, but it is the biggest compliment I think I've ever gotten professionally, that I've been elected to this thing twice. Holy cow. That is just, wow. If my peers are endorsing me, oh my God, it must be doing something right. And that's just the greatest feeling in the whole world. And I'm sure you're in that camp too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a lot of hard work. And especially in the beginning, we were meeting a lot. Getting that off the ground, we were meeting all the time. And yeah, to be reelected was amazing. And knowing that the MSPs were behind what we were doing and believed that we were the right people for the job, that was a wonderful thing to be involved in. So how has that community involvement changed the way you run your business or how you think as a leader?
That's a great question. And maybe this is another contributing factor to why I do this, because if you're involved, let's just say on a board of a good organization like we are together, you're rubbing elbows with smart people and everybody's got a different perspective. And I just love that. I don't have the whole world figured out. And I know that. And I own that. And I do my best. And I look and I see what other smart people are doing. And then oftentimes I start doing that too.
Yeah.
That's why I was picking your brain earlier about business operations, because it's not perfect. Let's make it better.
And you do get this trusted network of really friends because you've been working with them so long and you know where their viewpoints are, where they stand on issues, where you disagree with them on issues. And that's amazing to have such a network. Actually, another board member that you and I started with, Larry Mandelberg, just messaged me because we helped him move to France. We gave him advice because we live now in the Netherlands, and he came to visit us and said he wanted to move too. And there's a totally unrelated board story of taking advice from people you trust. I never would have met Larry otherwise. And yeah, it's really nice to be able to help and have friends that we barely get to meet, but we can rely on each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I didn't realize Larry already moved. That's pretty cool. I was car racing in California last May, and we got three of our friends live in California. So I was able to meet up with Steve, and he was giving me all kinds of pointers about how to navigate wine country and where to eat and all this other stuff. It was just awesome. Just awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to it. So a lot of MSPs say when it comes to volunteering, I don't have time for that stuff. What would you say to them?
You might be cutting yourself short. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say do it the way I'm doing it, because I'm doing kind of a lot. And I don't believe in doing anything that I can't devote all the energy it needs to. So I do, but pick a cause or two you get excited about, and you'll probably be pleasantly surprised, even though you're like, am I going to really get a client? It's not about getting a client out of it. It's a personally rewarding thing. And then sometimes that translates into professional, but I wouldn't go into it expecting that. And I don't know, it's like a way of life. And it just feel like it really puts you on a path to success and personal fulfillment.
Yeah. Yeah, I always feel like it's a little bit like a vacation, which maybe not a lot of other volunteers would maybe think that, but it's thinking in a different way. And sometimes I'll feel really bad with what I'm doing at work, but then when I go to the NSITSP or other organizations I volunteer at, I feel like, wow, I was able to contribute a lot here. And then I feel better when I go back to work because I feel like, all right, I have stuff to contribute. I can do this. So it's nice to have that little pick me up, because sometimes if you're always doing the same with the same people, you don't get that opportunity.
Totally. And I'm just such a big fan of learning from other people. We borrowed stuff for my company from the automotive repair industry. It's just, you just never know where you're going to be like, oh, we should do it that way. Yeah, they're talking about transmissions in cars, but that might as well be a server for this conversation. And I'm just like, yeah, this is a great way of doing things. Yeah. I love learning from other people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things, and this talks about learning from other people, one of the things we work on in the Gozynta Growth program is really helping MSPs figure out how to grow beyond the tech side into roles like yours that include leadership, influence, and really that long-term brand building and the customer-centric values. What advice do you have for MSPs looking to do more than just run a service desk?
That's a good question. I would almost do a little mathematical calculation. So I would look at, you don't have to do it exactly like this, but this exercise I did was, I thought, pretty cool. I ran through our accounting software, organized our revenue by industry. So like hospitality industry, the entertainment industry, retail, medical, all that. So then I had a ranking of, okay, where's all our money coming from? Okay. And then I ranked all of those industries by ease to work with, because as we all know, not all industries are created equal. And I won't out any industries on this podcast, but there are some that most MSPs run away from, understandably. So when I did that, the number 4 ranked option shot to the top. And for us, it was real estate, but it could be anything for anybody. So then we started doing initiatives, marketing initiatives, but also just general networking with the real estate industry. And it worked out. So I would figure out not necessarily where all your money's coming from, but what's your favorite revenue source when it's all said and done, and then see what that ecosystem looks like. And then perhaps plug yourself in there, not just as a, hey, give us money kind of thing, but like I sat down with more than a few real estate agents over coffee or a happy hour. And I said, you all use technology, but where are the gaps? What do you worry about? What do you think is a pain to use? In that industry, it's really interesting because a lot of times you're talking about a company of one person.
Right.
A lot of them are just singular individuals or parts of a team. And that's a unique challenge that needs to be overcome. And having that reflection allowed me to get insight that really made us make sense for that industry. And then really some of that stuff, like the singular person thing, translates into other industries. So then you're like, okay, how do we replicate this? And since we've already done it, and it's awesome. I love it.
Yeah, that's great. That is great. Great advice. And, your company name, Chris, your tone, your approach, it's all very human. And that's a really hard thing to maintain in tech. So, how have you kept that balance between professionalism and personality over the years?
That's a good question. I think a lot of it is I'm just a goofball generally, and you don't want to scare your clients off. Oh my God, they're in charge of our data. That's a little scary. But there is, as you alluded to, there is a level of professionalism that needs to be happening. But I think most people, not everybody, but I think the vast majority of people do enjoy a good chuckle every once in a while. And if you can do it in a non-disparaging, non-scary way, it tends to lower shields and people are a little bit more agreeable. And we just own it. So one little reinforcement tool it's small, but it's remarkably effective is everybody in my company has nerd in their title. So I'm a chief nerd. My operations person is the operations nerd. We have nerds, super nerds, and super duper nerds as the tiers go. And there's certainly some folks when we put out job postings that are probably like super nerd. I'm not doing that. But you know what? We don't want you. If you have
Right.
a problem with that, then so it's almost like its own little filter too.
That's-
And I don't know, like I remember, how long have you been in this industry?
I've been here for 7 years.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
So it was getting better by the time you got in, but I swear it's gotten better even since you got in. It used to be I'd be at an IT conference and it would be cocktail hour. We're all standing around high top tables just talking shop. And I would eventually say something along the lines of, yeah, we're all nerds here. And like when I first started doing that, people are like, excuse me? We're IT service professionals. We're not nerds. And I was like, you know what? You are an IT service professional and you're also a nerd. Like you can own it. You can own it. Nowadays, I feel like people are finally owning it. But like I was like that weird guy that they were like, look at him just throwing around insults. I was like, we are nerds. We are nerds.
And it's not an insult. It is not an insult.
No. I remember in our industry, you don't necessarily want your cell phone number as a public document. So the vast majority of our clients do not have my cell phone number because you're supposed to call the office. But a couple of them do over the years. You become friends or whatever. I get this phone call from one of my clients just randomly was driving somewhere, and he's like, "Hey, do you have a white Lexus with black windows?" And I'm like, "That's oddly specific." And I'm like, "I saw your car. It says Chief Nerd on the license plate." And I was like, "Yeah, buddy." So they put two and two together, and I'm like, "All right." But you gotta own it. It's on the business cards. It's in our email signatures. For me, it's its own little litmus test of if this offends you as a potential employee, you're not going to be a good fit.
And that's one of the things that we are so loud and proud with our consulting program is we want MSPs to value who they are and live it in their job description. And because a job description, that's a great way to filter out the people who are right and will thrive with you and will continue building the right thing with you. So you need to really have that vision of that and then put it everywhere. It needs to be in the handbook. The values need to reflect it. The job description needs to reflect it. And you really captured that. And I think that's wonderful. It's great to see that the whole team is waving the nerd flag proudly, which they should.
Thank you for saying that. That's quite the compliment. Yeah, it's intentional, but I think it works well. So I would be disappointed in myself if I didn't ask you where your company name came from, because that's super interesting.
Yeah, actually, when my husband Brian and I started this, we had the product Mobius. And Mobius gets your information to go where it needs to go, from ConnectWise Managed to QuickBooks Online for your finance data. So we decided we were going to start a company based on those products. We have to come up with a company name. And we were going to IT Nation Share at the time, and it was in Rhode Island. So we had a 3-hour trip. And I said, we'll take the whole time and think of the best company name. So we start driving. We got the end of the driveway and we had come up with the name. So where does it come from? When Brian was a little boy, he would work in the garage with his grandfather. And his grandfather would say, here, hand me the hammer, hand me the, you probably aren't hammering your car, but okay. I'm not really good with cars.
I hope not.
I'm using a hammer on it. I'm really bad.
Don't get near my car. Thank you.
I'm going to back off everyone's car. And then he would say, Brian, hand me the Gozynta. And he'd say, what is the Gozynta, Pop? And he'd say, it's a thing that goes into here. So when we started thinking about what would be the name of a tool that can get your information to goes into the places it needs to in another system, that's what we settled on.
That's so interesting. Okay.
Yep. So now we do consulting. We have a texting to ticket program that gets your information to goes into the ticket. And with our consulting, now it's getting information to goes into your head and your business. So it stayed true to us.
I love that. That's awesome. I feel like, if I could get on a soapbox for a second, I feel like one thing our industry often does not do very well is name our companies. And you can, within reason, name your company anything you want. And in my opinion, if there's not an impactful story behind it, or if it doesn't just grab you generally, you failed. And I've got friendly competitors who I respect that have named their companies things where you don't even know if they're an IT company. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do that. And you can call your company whatever you want to call it. So it's, yeah.
And you're stuck with that name.
Yeah,
you're stuck with that name for a long time.
Yeah. Oh, you better like it.
Exactly. If you don't think you're going to be with that name a long time, then maybe you shouldn't be in business because you aren't dreaming big enough.
Exactly. No doubt.
So the next section, Chris, is this MSP Growth Lightning Round. So it's really quick answers only. They're going to be random. But what's your weirdest customer service moment?
Okay, weird is subjective. I have an approach that I enjoy. So I train all my folks that we do not have customer complaints. We rather have customer service opportunities. I was just telling this story to a teammate this week because we had something. It was really like it was a new customer and they didn't understand the process. So they're pushing back a little bit and they were being respectful about it. But so we were talking about that, the right way to handle it. And I told her about this story where we had a client a couple of years or several years ago where they just were upset about every step of the process. And it was clear, I don't like labeling things, but it's clear we were dealing with some variation of a Karen. And I told the staff when it happened, I was like, look, this is somebody who probably goes through life and complains. And that's just that's how they're doing life. And I said, if we could turn that frown upside down, we will be like super memorable with this person. And there's always this dynamic that, you know, if you do a good job for folks, they love it and they'll probably never leave a good review for you.
Yes.
If you make a mistake or they have a misunderstanding, you will get a bad review in 0.4 seconds. So anyway, we held her hand and said, look, I understand you're upset. This is how it works and blah, blah, blah. And we did that at every stage. So every time she pushed back, we did that. And she became a raving fan that has referred lots of people to us, and as recently as Monday, liked something that we put out on social media.
It's fantastic. That's fantastic. And that's such great advice. We do that as well. And it's tough because customers with lots of service opportunities can be very scary. So it's hard to really lean into that. But instead of looking at that as, wow, let's see how we can make that person happy, gamify it as a challenge. And every single one of those that we've had have been huge fans. Again, the same thing, liking everything. Let me know if you need a customer review. So it's so important because I don't think that they have the opportunity to have that kind of service, because a lot of people are just like, oh, let's be done with that person. Here's your refund. Get out of my hair.
Right.
And instead, taking the time to really see this is a person that is looking for something, and you can reach those standards. You can deliver what needs to be, as long as it's not at the expense of your other customers.
Oh, for
But
sure. Yeah. And
that's another story.
and there are customers that you have to get rid of.
Exactly.
They are out there, but a lot of them, but it's salvageable. And one of my favorite quotes is from the CEO of Spotify, but he says, "Be kind. Everybody is on their own journey."
Yeah,
And that's good advice, because you don't know what somebody's been through,
absolutely.
and you can't know. So just be kind.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. If you weren't doing IT, what would you be doing instead?
Oh, that's easy. So I used to be an auto theft investigator, and I would do that again in a heartbeat.
Really?
I had so much fun with that. I was good at it. Yeah, I was getting national recognition. A lot of people were getting annoyed at me because I was like half their age and I was crushing it. But technology, ironically, killed it off, because tracking devices were getting better and cheaper and cheaper. And pretty much now you can't buy a car without there being a tracking device in it.
Wow.
So like my colleagues at all the auto theft units were getting reassigned or retiring. I'm like, yeah, I probably should do something different. So that's what got this party started.
Yeah.
But I would do it again in a heartbeat. It's like a high watermark in my first career. I used to do these like 100-person canoe trips one weekend every summer.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's so much fun and shenanigans. We paddling down the Shenandoah River. But inevitably at night, when we're all gathered around the bonfire goofing off, somebody would yell out, "Chris, tell us a work story." And I would tell them a crazy story about how I had to trick somebody into getting a car. It was so much fun. But like a lot of industries, it pretty much went away.
Yeah. Wow. It sounds great. It sounds like we could do another podcast of work stories from Chris. And it sounds like it could be a television series.
That would be exciting.
Like Chris the Car Hunter. So going back to the National Society of IT Service Providers, you've been really right at the forefront of giving the MSP industry a voice at CISA. And for those that don't know, that's the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is basically the federal government's cybersecurity front line that's making sure our critical systems, power grids, airports, and even the election systems are protected from cyber threats and attacks. Can you tell us a little bit more about getting involved with that? Because you're on calls almost every week with them.
Yeah, they're an interesting organization, and they had a lot of moving parts and a lot going on before the change in administration, but it's gotten even crazier since then. So yeah, they're trying to secure America and infrastructure and all that good stuff, and so are we. So you would think we're on the same page, but they had released a report several years ago, basically making the MSP universe look bad. Granted, there are bad companies in every industry, and I'm sure there's some bad IT companies that folks shouldn't do business with, but that's not a fair assessment of the industry as a whole. The vast majority of us are trying to do right and do well. And this communication came out that kind of badmouthed the industry, and I was like, we should not be fighting with CISA. We should be helping each other. We should be helping them, and they should be helping us. And right around the same time, just happened to meet the then director of CISA. She only recently retired, Jen Easterly. And I was talking to her and I said, hey, and I introduced myself. I explained that I'm an MSP. And she said, oh, we had a communication that recently went out about MSPs. Had you had a chance to look at it? And I said, yeah, I did. And keep in mind, I just met this person and she's a big deal. And I said, I did. And it was fucked up. And she said, what? And I said, yeah, we're all on the same team here. And you just slammed all MSPs. He was like, really? And I was like, yeah, I get where you're coming from, but that we should be working together. And she was like, yeah, we should be. And I was like, well, let's do it. So that's what got the party started. And since you've been around since the beginning, you got to see how hard that was to get off the ground. That took forever. And it's not even really CISA's fault. It's just the government just has a lot of red tape. But now we've got the ear of CISA and NSA and DHS, and we can't tell them what to do. We've never even tried to do that, but we get to be a positive influence on stuff like this. And you haven't seen a communication like that one I was referencing come out because they get it now. And we're all rowing in the same direction. A lot of times their bulletin kind of stuff, hey, watch out for this exploit, it's doing XYZ. It's written for a very high level nerd to understand. And there's a need for that, but they also need to have communications that's easy to understand for a person with a high school diploma, which is most of us. I told them that, and they said, oh, man, we were thinking that forever, but we weren't sure. And I'm like, I'm telling you, this is a thing. Like, you should do this. And they're like, yeah. I was like, because it's way easier for MSPs, for example, to get a client-friendly communication and share it, as opposed to, okay, let me take this 15-page document and turn it into a paragraph and a half that actually means something to a client. We don't have time for that. We're out here doing stuff. So they listen to us, which is really good because we're all trying to do the right thing.
And what a change from going from grouping the whole industry as something dangerous to having a seat at the table, having a voice, being able to make sure that this whole industry is now represented. And you started that with NSITSP. So that's fantastic. And thank you for your work on that.
Yeah, it's been very rewarding. Yeah, this is cool.
Yeah.
I'm the guy on the board that's the closest to DC. So I'm happy to be the person that annoys the government.
We just send you out there.
Yep.
Chris, what's the legacy you hope Cheaper Than a Geek leaves behind?
I was reflecting on stuff like that recently. I would like, and I feel like we've done some of this already. I would like to influence others in our industry in a variety of ways. Good customer service, good relationship with the government, all that stuff. Just being a good organization that does right by our clients, maybe even celebrates that. I don't want to pick on our industry. I feel like many industries don't quite get that quite right. And it's important. At the end of the day, we're all people. I realize we got Mac people, that's an audience here, and certainly Windows people. I'm in both camps, so I don't discriminate one versus the other. But I always thought Steve Jobs' approach to business made a lot of sense. It's all about the end user experience. That's it. How you get there is almost irrelevant. Are you putting a smile on somebody's face? You can't find an Apple user that is not shouting from the hilltops, these things are great. You Windows people are getting it wrong. And it's subjective, but like they have bought in. And that's the kind of clients that we love, are the folks that are just like, why would we go somewhere else? That would just be stupid. And I'm pleased to report the vast majority of our clients feel that way. That to me is a signal that we're doing something right. And I think we should all be like that. I'm not the only person that's doing this, but like that kind of a legacy would be awesome. That would make retirement very fulfilling for me.
Yeah. And it's so wonderful to take a step back and not look at what's easiest for everybody that's helping, but what's easiest for the customer. That was one thing that we did in the early days of Gozynta. We had our developers work with our customers because a lot of time as developers, they're solving an issue and it might not be the right way for the customer. They're just trying to solve the issue without the customer in mind. So when they have to deal with the customer actually using the software, they realize, oh, that's not quite so easy. That didn't work the way I thought it was going to. And that's such an important part.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Yeah, that's it. That's our industry in a nutshell. Yep.
So keeping that empathy strong for sure. And Chris, I thank you so much for being here. And that's it for today's episode of the MSP Growth Podcast. Christopher's story really reminds us that running an MSP isn't just about uptime and tickets. It's about being a trusted part of your community, finding your voice, even that nerdy one, and keeping it proud and standing for something that's bigger than the tech. And if you're an MSP looking to take the next step to build with intention, step into leadership or scale sustainably, check out the Gozynta Growth Program. You don't have to figure it out alone. So thanks for listening. Keep growing, keep showing up. And as Christopher might say, stay nerdy, my friends.
That's right. Thank you for having me. This was awesome.
Absolutely.